So, hi, welcome to Healing Conversations. I'm Sanne, and in this episode, I'm going to dive really deep into shadow work. And as you might notice or not, shadow work is something I'm really, really passionate about because it has really transformed my life completely. It's now a really important tool and of awareness that I use in my own healing, self-awareness and spiritual development, and it has really completely changed and shifted my life. So I'm really excited to share a lot of things about the shadow with you today. I will have to say that I will not be able to share everything because it's such a big subject. But I will touch on a lot of things and kind of see it as an introduction into shadow work and how you can start interacting with your shadow so it can benefit you in your life, so you can create healthier relationships with other people, but also create a healthier relationship with yourself. And in shadow work, you also see how kind of our internal system, so what is happening within ourselves, in our inner world, and also in our unconscious, and also our external reality, so our life, our environment, the people we interact with, how connected it really is. And shadow work can be a great way to empower yourself, that you're not powerless to the negative circumstances, you're not powerless to who you are or certain patterns or things or emotional themes or whatever it is that you're struggling with, but you actually have the opportunity to become aware of what you don't know, to become aware of what is hidden. And when we bring what is hidden to the light and bring our awareness into it, we actually empower ourselves to make changes and create a healthier relationship with ourselves and the world we live in. So what is the shadow? The shadow is something that we see across many different cultures. So it's kind of a universal theme, the light and the dark. And we see this back in religion. We see this especially very clearly in shamanism, that also in plant medicine ceremonies or psychedelics, it's very common for us to meet shadow aspects of ourselves. We see this in coming back in mythology. Of course, we have all these different gods and goddesses who represents all these different archetypes that are within the psyche, and they also really clearly represent aspects of the shadow and things that we suppress. And these stories can give us a deeper understanding of how these archetypes are basically running our unconscious, and that mythology can also help us to become conscious of those parts within ourselves. So there are a lot of different ways to work with the shadow. I first want to really also get a little bit into Carl Jung's work, who really brought shadow work basically into the West and really into psychology more in general, and that we become aware of what that shadow actually is. Because what he discovered, and at the time together with Freud, when they were still working together, is that whenever they were working with patients, they became aware of a very important theme, and it is that every patient had parts of themselves or different behavioral traits or different things that they did that they were consciously aware of. So they knew that they did that, and they knew why they did it. But at the same time, they all also had things they were completely unaware of, that first of all, they didn't remember that they did, or that they completely didn't identify with at all, but still it was something that playing an important role in their life, but they were completely unaware of it. And this is how they both came up with the consciousness and the unconscious. And the conscious we can see as the light, so everything aware of, and the unconscious as the more dark or the shadow, with everything we are unaware of. A common misconception is that the shadow is evil and the light is good. And we also see this come back in religion very often. But what we can also do is to have a grander perspective on it and to see that the light is not necessarily good and the bad is not The dark is not necessarily bad or negative. But what we do see is that in different cultures, and it really depends on what culture and what environment you grow up in, is that some parts of yourselves are labeled as good, and then you'll get praise, you'll get reward, you get like a positive reaction from people in your environment, from your parents, family members, or peers, and you continue to repeat those patterns. You will continue to put those aspects of yourself at the forefront and show them to the world. And also what we see in every single culture is that we have different parts of us or different behaviors, emotions, and all kinds of things that are negative. So they have negative association, and they're usually labeled as bad. So whenever we put those aspects of ourselves to the forefront, we would have get punished or a negative response, or we would end up alone. And then kind of within our mind, they're like, okay, we're not going to show these aspects of ourselves again, because a protective mechanism is created. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that again. We're going to suppress that and protect these vulnerable aspects of ourselves from getting hurt again, because we don't want to get negative consequences. We don't want to experience that pain again, which makes quite a lot of sense. But what happens is that all these parts and aspects and traits of ourselves are all being suppressed into the unconscious. So what happens is that we are no longer aware of it. Now, what is also is very common is that with these parts that we've suppressed, disowned about ourselves, is that we create a negative relationship with it. And so we don't want to see those parts. We don't want to feel it. We don't want to acknowledge that it's there. And the moment we do that, these parts are still within our unconscious. They're still there. We're just no longer aware of it. And they're still influencing all the decisions we make in our life. They still influence how we interact with other people, what happens in our relationships, and all these different things that are really major. But the reason why we can see the shadow a lot of times like negative is because all these things that we thought that are bad about us, that can be difficult to see. And sometimes it can also be difficult to feel the pain that's underneath, because it can be that what is in our unconscious is also hurt in our children. So different parts of us that were really hurt in childhood. And in order for us to interact with those parts of our unconscious, we do have to allow ourselves to feel that pain again. And it's okay that that can be challenging. And it's usually something we're not learned from a young age. So when we don't know how to do something, it can be something that we're afraid of. But often it's more the fear of the unknown. And that's a really big thing and a big theme of the shadow, what prevents people from actually working and interacting with it, which can have a really positive impact on your life, because it's really a tool of empowerment. But reason why me before, and I think I also see with a lot of people why we don't do it, because we don't know what's going to come out of it. We don't know what is going to come up, and it can really trigger and bring up the fear of the unknown. And usually what we fear about the unknown are actually experiences of the past repeating themselves. So we can also kind of see that when we look at it objectively, that we're then kind of in this vicious cycle, right? So all these patterns and things are influencing us because we've been hurt in the past. But the reason why we fear going into it, because we fear getting hurt again. So then we kind of get to this loop where we can feel really stuck. So actually, when is the best time to start doing shadow work is when you feel stuck. Because the moment when we feel stuck, this means is that we're not aware of something, right? Because if we would be completely aware of the situation we're in and why we are stuck and what is happening, we would no longer be stuck. So the moments when we feel stuck is a good place to start with. Also, what is a good place to start with is when different emotions are coming up. right? So when you're, for example, start noticing that constantly you're getting into a situation where your anger is triggered and you're someone who's always suppressed your anger, you're like, okay, I kind of have to go into that anger because it continues to come up. Or you're experiencing the same pattern in relationship again, and you're like, I don't want to go over and into that all over again and continue to experience it in my life. I want to be able to change it. And this is a good moment for us to start doing shadow work. So it is true that a lot of times what actually guides us to shadow work or kind of helps us get into it aren't always positive reasons. But what is really essential to know, and then we're also going to go a little bit more in the esoteric and shamanistic perspective, is that in order for life to be here, there is both the light and dark, right? So without the dark, there is no light, and the other way around. So we live in a life filled with duality. So that means that we also experience contrast in our life, have experiences that are difficult, that are challenges, or we have moments when we do experience limitation. And I think in another episode, I will go a little bit more into the duality of the mind. Because what we notice is that within us, so within our mind, we have opposing aspects, right? So we have for example, we can have an aspect that is really embodied sexuality and loves to talk about it, be sensual, be open about all of this. And then we can have another part within us that is like, no, sex is bad. It's like evil. I cannot enjoy it. If I enjoy it, I am doing something really bad and evil. And this can be aspect of herself that's like, I'm not having it. So what can happen is that in our life, what we experience within ourselves is a conflict between these aspects, right? That is like, I want to have all these sexual experiences and I want to be able to enjoy pleasure in my life. And I find it very important. And there's the other part like, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. So then we can try to learn a lot about sexuality and about how it isn't bad and all these different things, but we can still run into a situation where we don't allow ourselves to enjoy it. Well, what then is happening is that aspect that's within our unconscious, the part that we aren't as identified with, is also constantly influencing our decisions and what we do and what we say. But it kind of feels sometimes a little bit like it takes over. So we don't consciously do it because it's happening within our unconscious. And what we can do in shadow work when we say, okay, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to get into it because I see this pattern, I see the swing of the pendulum, that when I'm going into this aspect and then whoop, I'm going into the other aspect, and I have really no clue what's going on and what's behind this. So what we can then do, we can work with different tools or things. And for example, what is the first step is that allow those parts within your unconscious to express. So then you can, especially when you do it by yourself, it can be really nice to do it through writing. So you can just grab a notebook, just going to write down, you get a pen and paper, and you're just going to allow that part to express fully. So then you're going to say like, okay, I'm going to allow the part of me that thinks that sex is evil. I'm going to allow it to express fully, or the part of me that doesn't want to have sex, and allow it to express fully. And then read and reflect and listen to that aspect of yourself without judgment. And we do this when we are in the center perspective. So when I talked about these three parts, right? So we have the light, the middle, and the more the dark. When we kind of reflect and hold space for different aspects of ourselves, but the same for other people, we are more in a central perspective. So this is usually a non-judgmental perspective, but it's more very open, receptive. It listens and kind of creates a safe space for all these aspects of yourself to express. And then you can become aware of like all the beliefs that aspect of you has, where it's coming from. And maybe it has had really traumatic or painful experiences that has led to these beliefs. And then it's about showing compassion for that aspect of yourself. And you can continue to do that until you feel like this part of you is completely being able to express itself. And it's also been able to be listened to, and that it kind of feels seen and heard by you. And then you can also become aware by reflecting back on it and listening to it. What is it that it actually needs? What is it that it wants? And to really get to know it and interact with it in a compassionate way. And when you feel like that process is complete, then you can go into the other part. And you can even, if it helps for you, the switching, you can even get a different notebook or a different pen, or sit at a different chair, or even go into a different room. So you can kind of make that shift in consciousness a little bit easier. And what you can then do, you can then just write down everything that part feels and whatever allowed that to fully express. And then you can see what both of these parts wants and needs, and how can you go about meeting those wants and needs in a healthy way. And this is a process that unfolds. So with shadow work is very essential, because we're working with a lot of things we don't know about beforehand, that we learn to kind of trust the process, trust the unfolding, trust ourselves. Whenever that feels difficult to you, it can be really helpful to have someone support you in that process. And I still really like and enjoy that myself too, that you have someone else holding the space for you, or someone else helping you through that process, because you don't have to necessarily do it through writing. You can also do that through a conversation. So you're allowing a part of you to express. So like I said before, whenever you feel, for example, really angry, you can also just allow that anger to express. And if you have a friend or a partner or someone who's willing to say, like, I'm willing to listen to you, and beforehand you let them know, it's like, this part of me comes up and it's really angry and just needs to express. And then you can talk to someone about it. Or what is also a great way is that we can learn to express ourselves through the body, through movement, through dance, whatever it is. Or you're someone who loves music, and you can express it through music, just singing or playing instrument. Or you can also express certain aspects of part of yourself that you suppress through art. Because it's essential when we work with the shadow that we first of all become aware of what's within the shadow. We listen to this aspect. And this is also explained in Buddhism when Buddha invites Mara, who represents his shadow self, for a cup of tea. So that you just allow yourself to receive those parts of yourself with love. You listen to them without judgment. And then naturally something will come out of it, and it's really about trusting the process. It can be really, really beneficial, like I said before, for someone to guide you really through this process. So we have special methods that are also designed for integrating the shadow. Ones I really like is parts work. You have internal family systems, you have voice dialogue that work with the shadow. But like I said as well, I also really love art and dance and music. I really love having those pure expressions as well. I think they're also really essential, that we can have creative ways to express the shadow, and that can really be super healing. And we can also combine these processes. If you're someone who really wants to be supported in that process, I also want to let you know that I also offer these integration sessions, so where we meet certain aspects of your shadow, and you can then set an intention for something you want to work on and work with, and then I can completely guide you through that process, because what will come up for you will be completely unique to you. But like I said, you can also do it through writing, but it can be extremely beneficial to have someone to guide you through that process. And what I've learned also with working with someone, it can also really help you to strengthen that process within yourself, because you're kind of learning from a professional how you can really do that. So if you're interested in that, I offer integration sessions, and I also have a private mentorship program where I'm opening now 2 spots for bringing in new clients. And in that is actually a 3-month journey where I guide you really, really deeply into how to work with all these different tools with shadow, but how to also work with archetypes, how we are able to interact with emotions, and really create our life from a place of empowerment. So if it feels like either the private sessions or the mentorship program feels like something that is what you need at this time, please feel free to reach out. You can always send me a message, or you can just go to sannehart.com and you'll be able to find a lot more information about it. And before working with someone, I always first have a 30-minute free discovery call, so we can first just have a chat, see if it kind of matches with you and what you need this time, and if a really good right fit to work together. And if so, then we can see what will work for you best and create something that's really aligned with your wants and needs. So that's really, I think, what I mainly wanted to share about shadow work today. Of course, there's a lot more to go into. So if you have any questions about it, just let me know and I will answer directly, or maybe even create another episode to it that goes even deeper into it. Because like I said, it's a really big topic and I have a lot more to share, but I don't want to make this episode too long. So I'm going to close it off for now. And I really want to thank you for listening. I want to wish you a wonderful week. And yeah, bye.